Here is Dr. Mark Sandoval. He is the speaker director, I'm not sure his official title, at New Paradigm Ministries, which is his ministry. Prior to that, he was the president and medical director at UC Pines for a number of years. And so we are excited to have him with us this morning. I'm going to turn the time over to him because we got lots to cover, and we just hope that you are blessed as well.
Amen. Thank you very much. Good morning. Yes. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Oh, do you like beautiful days? Yeah, I do too. I do too. When you build, do we have any builders? Okay. So is it important to have a good foundation? Yes. If you don't have a good foundation, some things are going to go wrong. Like if you live in Florida and you have some water pipe issues underground, you can end up creating a nice sinkhole and something like that, and your house goes. And I grew up in Florida, and it's quite interesting when you have a sinkhole that opens up and it swallows up houses and vehicles and other things of that nature. And of course, if you live in Florida, you're not exactly sure whether you have a firm foundation or not, because everything is sand. Right? There was, did you ever hear about the Millennium Tower in San Francisco? Anyways, it's a very expensive upscale condominium building that was built in San Francisco. And you know, they were selling some of the condominiums there for a few $1 million, and you know, they had NFL players and others that had, you know, purchased their residence there for in San Francisco at the Millennium Tower. And but after they built it, they started having a little bit of a problem. They noticed that a crack started developing in the basement, and then it started cracking even more. And when they had people come out to take a look at it, they noticed that it was leaning a couple of inches in one direction, and then that continued. And so it ended up settling on one side and being somewhat stable on the other side, and so the whole building started tilting a little bit. That was a little bit of a problem. And one of the problems was they took the the pylons underneath the foundation to help hold the base up. They took it down about 90 feet, which is, you know, it was according to code, but bedrock was about 200 feet below. And so they didn't go all the way down to bedrock. And so they ended up having problems, and the fix was a multi-million-dollar fix of trying to retrofit the building with pylons that went all the way down to bedrock and prevent this settling of the building, you know. And so starting with a good foundation is important, and a good foundation is one that doesn't move. It's stable, right? It stays the way that it is, regardless of what pressure that you put on it, or regardless of what you think about it, regardless of how you, you know, how you perceive it, and so on. It is what it is. And when we think of something that's foundational, then we need to think of something that is according to law. Not human law, because human law changes, but according to natural law, because natural law doesn't change. Gravity is what gravity is. Thermodynamics are what they, you know, I mean, the laws that govern how things function, they are what they are. And there is a fundamental law of all nature, and that fundamental law tells us that nothing exists or functions from itself, and nothing exists or functions for itself. And if we just break it down very simplistically, that law says that everything in nature takes in order to give. Right? So you have to have power, materials, resources in order for something to exist, for it to function, and if it's living, for it to live. But everything takes that power, material, and resources and passes it along to something else, and so serves as a channel. And this is the law of life. The law of life is taking to give. And so this shows us that in nature, everything functions like a channel, and a channel has an entrance and an exit. And at the entrance is where you take, and at the exit is where you give. Now, where does cause and effect fit into the channel? Where would you find cause and where would you find effect? All right, cause is at the entrance of the channel, and effect is at the exit of the channel. Because what goes out of the channel comes out of the channel because of what came into the channel, right? Now, everything, again, takes to give, and everything takes from one place and gives to another place. It's unidirectional, right? Nothing gives where it takes from, and nothing takes where it gives to. It always takes from one place and it gives in another, or it takes in another place and gives to another. So it's unidirectional, like a river. That's a picture of a waterfall going backwards. Do you know why? Yeah. So you have an external force, in this case called wind, significant wind, that takes that waterfall and throws it back up into its origin. Now, the water doesn't do that naturally. You have this force called gravity that's pulling that water down, but you actually, in this case, have another force that is overcoming the force of gravity, and that's called wind. You have wind resistance and so on. Wires carrying electricity, hose carrying water, and so on. It's unidirectional. Takes from one place, gives to another place. Now, you might say, well, the wire can take from either end. Well, that's true, but it doesn't take from both ends at the same time. It's got to take from one end and give in another, or it takes in the other end and it gives in the one. Right? And so everything functions in nature, taking and giving. But if you're going to give, you have to have something to give to. So that means that there's going to be another channel to take from what you give, which will then give to another channel that takes from what was given, which gives to another channel which takes from what is given, and ultimately all of the taking and giving ends up in a circuit. And so everything every system functions in a circuit. Electricity functions in a circuit. The water, the hydrological cycle here on the earth, it functions in a circuit. Sometimes very complex circuits. You have circulatory system, your nervous system, other biological systems, they function in circuits. And there must be an order to every function. And the order of function never changes. Anybody take chemistry class where you actually got to play with the chemicals? Play. You didn't have free roam of playing with the chemicals, but you got to do experiments of putting this with this and doing that and so on, and all of a sudden something that was clear turns blue, or something that was blue turns clear, or something goes and does its thing and whatever, and it's pretty cool. But what happens if you put different chemicals in? You going to get the same reaction? No. And what happens if you put chemicals in a different order? Are you going to get the same reaction? Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, there's some where it doesn't matter if you put this one in first and that one in next and that one in third. They're all going to end up with the same thing. But some of those chemical reactions, if you put the first one first and the second one second and the third one third, it works. But if you put the third one first and the second one last and the first one in the middle, it doesn't work. You get something entirely different, right? So order is really important. And when the order is correct, the system functions the way that it's supposed to. And when the order is incorrect, then the system dysfunctions. Right? And truth is information that produces the correct order so that things work. And error is information that produces the wrong order so that things do not work. Right? So, is truth important? Well, yes, sure. And how can you test the truth? If it works. If it works, right? Now, there's other ways that we also test truth, but this is one way that you can test the truth, because the truth will work. And if you think what you have is truth and it isn't working, question what you think is truth, right? If what you think is truth isn't working, question what you think is truth. Now, of course, there's gravity, and gravity is what it is, and our understanding of gravity might change from time to time, but gravity itself doesn't change. Whether you understand gravity from the Newtonian standpoint, where it's kind of like a magnetic attraction between different masses, and the greater the mass, the more the magnetic force that it has to attract something else to itself, or whether you understand it from the Einsteinian perspective of warping space, mass warping space, like having a bowling ball on a stretched pantyhose or something like that, and the bowling ball causes it to stretch down like this, and if you get anything close enough that's in that kind of slope going down, then it's going to kind of draw it towards the bowling ball, and so on. Right? Whether it's one or whether it's the other, guess what? You jump off of something, and what's going to happen? Yeah, you're going down, right? So the experience of gravity doesn't change, even though our explanation of how gravity works might change from time to time. But it is what it is. Thermodynamics is the same thing, and the law of cause and effect is the same thing. They are absolute. They are what they are. They don't change. Our understanding of them might change, but they don't change. And when it comes to function and law, again, everything that functions is governed by law. And every function of everything is governed by law. And all laws that govern function are unchangeable. Can you imagine what it would be like if the laws that govern function changed? Like today, at a certain time, gravity goes to half power. Whoa, everybody's a lot lighter, at that moment. Or gravity switches direction, and now it's that direction, right? At 3 times its normal force. Yeah, you go zipping up, and into the ceiling, and if you were outside, well, and if it went in that direction, well, that same gravitational force would be pulling on the building and everything else, and so on, and so everything would start flying off in that direction. And what happened if the laws that govern lift on an airplane, right? How much lift you have to have compared to how much mass of the airplane? What if those laws, while you were in flight, changed so that you have to have 4 times the amount of lift that you currently have in order to keep the same amount of mass in the air? Yeah, that would not be a good thing, right? So the laws that govern function are unchangeable, and because they're unchangeable, we can experiment with them, and we can predict outcomes because it's predictable, right? It's predictable, and that's good. So now we can fly, we can explore space, we can explore the ocean with submarines, we can form batteries, we can make robots, and all sorts of stuff, because laws that govern function are unchangeable. They're unchangeable. Now, yesterday we talked a little bit about this, but we also were talking about the individual, the human being, and the components that we're made of. And you and I have a brain, and we also have thoughts. And when there are thoughts in combination with the brain, then there is the production of electrical activity. There's electricity. And you can measure that electricity with a little device called an electroencephalogram, or an EEG. And it's where you get all those little stickies and you put them on the scalp. And then it's connected to a computer that can, a device that can read that electrical activity, and then a computer that can print it, with a printer that can print it out. And, and you can do training to look at the patterns and the little squigglies that are on there and figure out which ones are normal versus which ones are not normal, and so on and so forth. So you have that electrical activity, and when the electrical activity in the brain it starts in the cortex of the brain, and then the signals are sent via the axons or the nerves to the central part of the brain, which we might call the limbic system. And there in the central part of the brain, it releases chemicals, neurotransmitters and so on, right? So it releases chemicals there, and then you have other neurons that pick up the chemicals and send a signal back to the cortex so that you get a reflex mechanism. So you have electrical activity from the cortex down to chemistry produced in the central part of the brain, picking that up and sending the information back to the cortex to evaluate whether the information that was sent was good or not. And the response to that is your feelings, right? Your feelings or your emotions and so on. And so you get a pretty quick feedback of whether the information and the electrical activity that was sent was good, right? Or whether it wasn't. Now, feelings are the result of chemistry. So you can manipulate feelings by manipulating chemistry. And that's indeed what medication, like anti-anxiety medication, antidepressants, other things of that nature, that's what it does. It manipulates chemistry, and when you manipulate chemistry, then you manipulate how somebody feels. And since thinking requires proper chemistry, if the chemistry is messed up, well, the thinking is going to be difficult, right? And if the chemistry is not messed up, if the chemistry is how it's supposed to be, well, then it makes thinking a lot easier, right? And so I can change how you feel by injecting you with different chemicals, right? I can change how you feel by injecting you with different chemicals. But guess what I can't change by injecting you with any chemical that I want to? I can't change what you think. Right? I can't change what you think. I can't take any chemical and make you think unselfish thoughts. I can't take any chemical and make you think generosity, right? I can't give you any chemicals and make you think any particular thought in particular, but if I mess up the chemicals enough, I can make it so that it's difficult for you to think correctly, right? Because you have to have the chemicals in the process of thinking, right? So we can manipulate feelings by chemistry, but we cannot manipulate thoughts by chemistry, right? And so in the cortex, well, that's where you have reason and judgment and forethought and understanding and recognition and awareness and other things of that nature. And then in the central part of the brain is where you have your feelings, emotions, automatic responses, and so on and so forth. Now, thinking is what we do the most. You do more thinking than you do breathing. Right? Now, of course, we're always breathing, but we're thinking a lot faster than what we're breathing. Right? And we're always thinking, but the question is, what are thoughts? What's that? Beliefs? Okay. Experience? Information? Okay. What's that? The intents of our heart? Okay. Choices? Okay. Yeah. Where do they come from? And where do they start? Okay, so from last night we were talking about the different components that the human is made from, and one of those components is suggested, yes. Wherever they start is where you will find the human being's function starts. Right? And what do thoughts do? What's that? Motivate, okay. Inspire? Okay, they affect the feelings. Create character, okay. Produce action. Good. So, look around you. You can look up, you can look in front, you can look beside, you can look, behind, and so on. What around you is the result of thought? Everything. Absolutely everything is the result of thought. Somebody thought about the pew. Somebody thought about the piano. Somebody thought about the chair. Somebody thought about the carpet. Somebody thought about the framing. Somebody thought about the fan. Somebody thought about. And when you get to the things that humans did not think about, like the grass outside and the sunshine and the air and all that kind of stuff, well, where'd that come from? From God's thoughts, right? So everything is the result of thought. So what do thoughts do in you? Everything. They do everything in you, right? So, can the brain by itself think? So the brain is composed of chemistry. We can take it out, we can examine it, we can cut it, after you're dead, hopefully, we can cut it and we can examine it and do all that kind of stuff and whatever, and and you can interact with it on a physical level and so on. It's made of chemicals. Anything that is physical is made of chemicals, right? It's made of molecules, made of atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons, subatomic particles, and so on. And everything that is chemical can react, right? So chemicals can react. And so you have reactions in chemical things. And so they're dependent upon outside factors in order to function. And they can only function according to the laws that govern their function. Do you know of any chemicals that can disregard the laws that govern their own function? Or do all chemicals function according to the laws that govern their function? Okay, yeah, the second option, yeah. So chemicals can only function according to the laws that govern their function. And there are laws that govern their function, and they can react according to law. And chemistry can absorb, store, and share energy and information, like a computer hardware, right? But how many thoughts can the brain itself think? So chemical elements cannot feel anything. Chemical elements cannot choose, cannot make decisions, cannot destroy themselves, cannot have consciousness, cannot have cognitive abilities, cannot have morals, cannot realize something and like it or not like it. Chemical elements cannot organize themselves. They can't regulate themselves. They can't act for themselves. They can only react to something. And they can't look in the mirror and study themselves and know why things are the way that they are. So chemicals don't have the capacity for any of that. But how many people sitting here do? Yeah, every one of us, right? Every one of us does. So we're not just like puppets on a string. Humans can do all of those things which chemistry cannot. And humans not only react, but we can act for ourselves. So where do the abilities come from if they don't come from just chemistry? So do you need love? Yes. Do you need truth? Yes. Do you need justice? Do you need compassion? Do you need harmony? Yes. Do you need security? Yeah. So how many cells in your body need those things? There's not a single cell in your body that could care less whether you're secure or not, or whether you have love or anything else of that nature. It's not the need of cells. There's nothing physical that has any of those needs. Those are spiritual needs, right? They're spiritual needs. And you also feel hunger and thirst and fatigue and chills and suffocation and so on, and those are all physical symptoms that shows that the body lacks something, right? It's like the gas gauge on the vehicle. For whom is the gas gauge? For the driver. It's not for the car. If the car could supply its own need of gas, then there would be no need for the gas gauge. The gas gauge is there because the car cannot supply its own need, and it must show its need to the driver so that the driver can use the car to go searching for gas and fill the car with the gas, right? So the symptoms prove the body cannot provide for its own needs, but there must be something that controls the body. There must be something that supplies the needs, like there must be a driver of the car. Right? So a physical thing can only take in and absorb what it needs when it's brought close to it. If you need water, but the water stays over here, well, you can't take it in. You can't absorb it, and you can only absorb it in ways that you can absorb it. I could take the water and I could go, oh, I'm so thirsty. And I could have it close, and I could have it all over my skin, and so on and so forth. Is that going to satisfy my need? No, because the plate, and what if I'm like, oh, I need to absorb it, so I needed to get it inside, so does it work absorbing water through the respiratory tract? No, no. There's only one way, but you got to bring it close, right? You can absorb it when it gets into the digestive tract, but it's got to get into the digestive tract in order for you to absorb it. Sunlight, well, you don't want to get sunlight in the digestive tract itself, particularly. It's better for it to go through the skin, right? And air, well, you could swallow as much air as you want to, but you're not going to absorb enough in order for you to live. And you live in air, and you're not going to absorb enough of it through your skin, although you do get a little bit. But you got to get it into your respiratory tract. And so it's only when you bring those things close and in the right place where the body can actually absorb it. But physical things cannot go out and search for and find what they need and take it in. So what is it in you and I that receives the symptoms, that recognizes what's needed, that goes and searches for what's needed and brings it to the body and causes it to bring it in, to eat and to swallow and to breathe and so on? The brain. But the brain is part of the need. So you need freedom, security, knowledge, understanding, loyalty, confirmation, joy, and so on, but there's not a molecule or a combination of molecules that needs those things. All of those are spiritual. And spiritual needs reveal the presence of a spiritual entity. And we talked about it yesterday, briefly. You need oxygen, water, food, warmth. You don't need suffocation, dehydration, starvation, freezing, burning. You need love, acceptance, respect, honor, truth, justice, mercy, compassion. You do not need selfishness, rejection, disrespect, dishonor, lies, injustice, cruelty, indifference. So, what's the difference between what you need and what you don't need? What you need is good. And what you don't need is bad, right? You only have good needs. You don't have any bad needs. Right? So everything you need is good, and when it's supplied, it allows you to function properly. So God only created you with a need for what's good. He never created you with a need for what is bad, and you can only actually pursue what you need, which is what is good. You cannot pursue what is contrary to your needs or what is bad. Unless, right, there's a caveat, right? Unless you're deceived into believing that you need what you don't need. And or you are forced into circumstances that determine that you must choose amongst your needs. And you will renounce a lesser need for the purpose of retaining a greater need. Right? So here's an individual in a situation of that nature. You recognize him? Yeah, Mahatma Gandhi. All right. And what is he doing? He's fasting. Why is he fasting? Does he not have a need for food? Yes, he's clearly not in an overfed state, right? It's not like he's fasting because he has too much and he needs to get rid of the too much. No. He has a need for food and he's not eating. Why is he not eating? His beliefs. He has a need for justice, right? He has a need for social equality or something of that nature, right? And for the spiritual need, he is willing to forego the physical need. Right? The physical needs fulfill life. Spiritual needs fulfill purpose. Right? And if there's a conflict between the spiritual and physical needs, which ones win? Oh, the spiritual. So the proof that we're more than just matter is that we can renounce the most physical aspect, the most important physical aspect, and that is life. People can renounce life. But if life is the most important physical thing, and you can renounce it, then there must be something beyond just the physical. Right? The spiritual needs are always more important and come before the physical needs. And you can renounce life, whether that's in suicide, whether that's martyrdom, whether that's self-sacrifice for some reason, but you can never give up purpose. And if somehow you think you have lost your purpose, then you lose your reason to live. So everything that gives purpose is spiritual. Now, we talked a little bit yesterday, and I'm just going to recap. We have evolutionary theory, which is the basis of scientific, it's the paradigm of the scientific community, right? Is evolutionary theory. And evolutionary theory says that mass is self-existent, that matter is self-sustaining, that matter can organize itself into more and more complex systems, that matter can create life through complexity, right? And it says that matter can regulate itself, so it can give itself commands, it can mutate itself, it can destroy itself, and so on. That matter is conscious, can think, can feel, can have spiritual capacities, and that the more complicated the system is, the more complex the spiritual capacities one possesses. Right? All of these are parts of evolutionary theory. Right? Is it the right order or is it the wrong order? Yeah, it's the wrong order. What they've gotten is the channel and turned it around backwards. And they've got cause where effect is and effect where cause is. And if you get cause and effect mixed up, does that create problems? Oh yeah, yeah. How do you define whether somebody's dead or not? You got somebody on the ventilator, they're in the ICU, they've been through significant trauma, asphyxiation, other things of that nature. The ventilator is breathing for them, the heart is beating, blood is circulating, and all that kind of stuff. But how do you want to know whether the person's actually alive or not? You go check the brain. And you want to see whether it has any electrical activity. Or another way that you can check it is do a scan to see if there's any metabolic activity in the brain. Is there any metabolism that's happening with the brain cells, or is there an electrical activity that's happening in the brain cells? If there is no electrical activity, guess what? They're brain dead. Right? And guess what's following? All of the rest of the body is going to follow, right? Eventually. So a difference between a dead person and a living person is the electrical activity that's there in the brain. And the question, of course, is where does that electrical activity come from? And what did we talk about last night? Yeah, it comes from the Spirit. So you and I have a spirit. God formed man of the dust of the ground, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul or a living being. And so you and I we are a soul. We don't have a soul, you are a soul, but the soul is made up of two components, and that is body and spirit, right? And you only function when the body and the spirit are together. And so the components of man is body and spirit, and the combination is the soul, and we often refer to that as the mind, right? And as long as the two are together, you have life. But when you have a separation of the spirit from the body, what dies? What dies? Well, now you have no electrical activity, and you have a dead body and a dead spirit. Right? No life, no function, no nothing on either. Right? I know there's kind of misconceptions from that standpoint, and I'm not trying to imply that the spirit is a separate entity. It's not. You have a liver and you have kidneys. They are components of you. You have a spirit and you have a body, and they are components of you, right? But they're not separate entities. They can't live on their own. They can't, so on and so forth. It's united. And when it's not united, there's no function. So your body signals the needs by impulses that come through the neurons to the cortex of the brain. That is received by the spirit, or the mind. If you want to say the mind, that's fine. And then that information is received, it's evaluated, and then based upon that information, decisions are made. And when those decisions are made, either your yes or your no, right, because you can give a yes or you can give a no to anything, then that decision is given back to the body through the cortex of the brain, and that decision generates the electrical activity in the cortex. And then that electrical activity is communicated via the neurons and the nervous system, central and peripheral nervous system, to the various different parts of the body. And then from the different parts of the body, information is received back, and there's a feedback mechanism. It's a circular thing, right? It's a circuit. And so there's always a monitoring of what's going on in the body, evaluating it, and making decisions, and then sending the decisions back through the nervous system to the body to control and regulate everything that happens. And so when the information is sent from the body to the spirit, we might consider that to be a request, like if there's nothing in the stomach and the signal is sent up to the cortex that there's nothing left in the stomach, and then you feel hunger, that's a request, but do you have to fulfill that sensation? Like, do you have to eat if you're hungry? Does the body say, okay, it's time to eat, and now take the spirit captive and drive you to the refrigerator, even though you were working on an important project in the meantime? No, although it seems like it at sometimes, right? What if the body was able to put the spirit to sleep? When the body said, oh, I need rest. But you're in the middle of driving at 70 miles an hour down the highway. And all of a sudden the body says, oh, time to sleep. No, it doesn't work that way. Right? So the information sent from the body to the spirit is a request. But when the spirit sends a decision to the body, does the body have the opportunity of saying no? No. The body's got to do it. So what's sent from the spirit to the body is a command, right? It's a command. And the only way the body cannot do it is if there's no communication between here and there. So you have spinal cord injury or something like that, so you can't get the signal to the part of the body to let it know what to do, or you don't have the fuel, right? So the body just doesn't have the capacity to actually accomplish the command that's given, right? So hunger, thirst, fatigue, chill, suffocation, right? Those are signals sent by the body to the spirit so the spirit can look for and supply what the body needs. And because the body cannot supply its own needs, it's the spirit that makes the body move, that searches for the physical things that we need, and makes the body bring those things in, i.e. causes you to breathe and drink and eat and sunbathe and other things like that. Or that causes the body to stop breathing those things in, to cause you to hold your breath, or to fast, or to not go out and sunbathe, and whatever. Now, physical things, which your body is made of, always react to outside forces or information. And the body can be governed from outside of itself, right? So somebody can take you, grab your arm, and make it go this way or that way, and and so on, or this way, and handcuffs and drag you into jail and other things like that. So the body can be governed from outside of itself. It can be forced, and it can be harmed from outside. Right? Knife, gun, asphalt at 35 miles an hour, other things of that nature. So it can be harmed from outside of itself, but the spirit is different. The spirit can react to outside forces and outside information. But it can also act for itself. The spirit can make its own decisions, its own choices. It can act for itself. And the spirit is governed from inside. It's a self-governing entity, right? You are created as a self-governing entity. And the spirit can never be forced, and it cannot be harmed from the outside. It can only harm itself from the inside. Right? And these are important points for us to remember, because we're just now building the foundation. We're just building the foundation. But this is going to enter into our physical health. This is going to enter into our relationships. This is going to enter into our mental health, and so on, in every aspect of our lives. So, in your body, you have your eyes, and they receive information. That information is transmitted via the optic nerve to the optic cortex, and so on in the brain, and that's received then by your mind, by your spirit. You have ears, you have a nose, you have a tongue, you have, skin, and so on, hands and whatever. That information is received, it's evaluated, and then it's the mind or it's the spirit that can see, that can hear, smell, taste, and feel. It's not your eyes that can see, but you must have your eyes in order to be able to see, right? So you can have an individual that has fully intact eyes, that has fully intact and functional optic nerves, that has fully and intact optical cortex, and they're still blind. Right? And they can't see anything, even though all of the physical structure is completely normal. Now, we normally think of this in the context of somebody that's under severe pressure, severe stress, or other things of that nature, and we might call it a psychosomatic response, where an individual a moment ago could see, and now this moment they cannot. And when some of that psychological pressure is relieved, then they can see again. Right? Because it's not the body that sees, but you must have the components and the physical components of the body to be able to see. Right? And then from that, you can make a decision and then control the body. And then the body responds. So the body receives and transmits physical information, and the spirit interprets it. It sees, hears, smells, tastes, feels, and then determines how to respond. And without a spirit, there is no consciousness, there's no thoughts, there are no spiritual needs, no judgment, no morality, no responsibility, no spirituality or ideologies, there's no sensory perceptions, there's no education or teaching or learning, there are no voluntary bodily movements. All of those are possible because you have a spirit. Does your spirit function apart from your body? No. 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 All right. Do you need love? Okay. So what's the definition of a need? Okay, something that sustains your spirit. And your body. Right? Spirit's got nothing if the body's not there and functioning either. What happens if you don't have what you need? You die. So a need is something that you must have in order to live. You must have in order to survive, and so on. It's not like a want where you'd like to have it, but if you don't have it, you're still going to live. Right? But it's also something that you cannot produce. Because if you can produce it, it's not really a need. Right? So there are certain amino acids that you don't need to get in your diet at all because they can be made from other amino acids. But there are certain amino acids that you must get in your diet. They're called essential amino acids because your body cannot produce them. So you need the essential amino acids because you cannot produce those essential amino acids. So it's something that you must have to survive, but which you cannot produce. So can you produce love? I heard it. No, you can't. So is that just our problem, or is that everybody's problem? Ah, it's everybody's problem. All right. Yeah. So everybody needs love, and nobody can produce love. That's a problem, seemingly. Yeah. And what we try to do is we try to give love in order to get or to receive love, right? So we try to give love in order to receive love when we're not the source of love and we don't have love. So how do you get to the point of giving love first in order to receive love if you're not the source of love? You must believe something about yourself. You must believe that you are the source of love. And if you are the source of love, then you can love others with your love. And if you are the source of love and you love others with your love, and your love is not appreciated or it's rejected, then who is it that's not appreciated and who is it that's rejected? You are. And so now you are subject to disappointment. You are subject to rejection. You are subject to, and you go on, and the list goes on and goes on and goes on. Right? Are you the source of love? Have you ever loved anybody with your love? And if you have never loved anybody with your love, has your love ever been rejected? Interesting thoughts. Let's ponder these things. Do you need a love that is full or incomplete? Do you need a love that's constant or intermittent? Do you need a love that's unselfish or selfish? Do you need a love that's personal or impersonal? Now, how many people need a love that's full and constant, unselfish, and personal? Everyone. Everyone. Do you need a respect that respects you partially or completely? Do you need a respect that respects you some of the time or all of the time? Do you need a respect that respects you so that it can get something from you or so that it can give something to you? Yeah. Do you need a respect that respects you because it has to or because it wants to? Because it wants to. So you need a respect that respects you completely, constantly, so that it can give to you because it wants to. And do you need an understanding that understands you partially or completely? Some of the time or all of the time? For itself or for you? Yeah, for me. Because it has to or because it wants to? Wants to. So you need an understanding that understands you completely, constantly, for your sake, because it wants to. And every spiritual need you have, you need it completely. Partial will never work. Intermittent will never work. Forced will never work. Ulterior motives never work. So you need it completely, you need it constantly, you need it willingly, you need it selflessly. That's what you need. And how many people need it that way? Everyone. Everyone. So can something that needs what you need be the source of what you need? Can another human who needs what you need be the source of what you need? Can another tree be the source of what other trees need? You put the one tree and it stick its roots in the next tree, and then you put the next tree's roots in the next tree, and the next one, and the next one, and so on and so forth. What's going to happen to all the trees? Yeah, they're all going to die. Because no tree can be a source for another tree. Similarly, no human can be a source for another human. And it doesn't matter how many humans you try to source from. You could take the whole population and try to source from the whole population. Just like you could take all of the trees and put all of the trees in all of the other trees, and all of the trees will die. So who or what is the source of love and respect and understanding that is complete, constant, voluntary, and unselfish? Well, it can't be another human being, and it cannot be multiple other human beings. It must be something that is itself full of love and respect and understanding that constantly, voluntarily, and unselfishly offer those things to you for your sake. And that is God. And I picture God as a circle because he's complete in himself. Right? And he is truly independent. He is not dependent upon anything else. He is the source of everything. And then there's his creation. And his creation is made up of many, many, many parts, and every part functions according to the fundamental law of taking to give. And so every part is a channel. And so one channel takes from God, another channel takes from that channel, and another one from that one, and continues and continues and continues along and around until it returns back to God. And it all functions in a circuit. Right? It all functions in a circuit, with God at the beginning and God at the end. And if you've never read the book Desire of Ages, I suggest you read chapter 1. And you'll see this illustrated. Right? Now, your spirit or your mind functions like a channel as well. And it has an entrance where it takes, and it has an exit where it gives. And cause is at the entrance, and effect is at the exit. And the spirit or the mind is dependent. It has needs that must be supplied from outside of itself. It is active, it's not passive. So that means that it must actively take for itself. It cannot be filled passively from the outside. So a lot of people like the term receive better than take because sometimes taking has the connotation of force, right? The reason that I use the word take is because take is never understood as passive. Take is always active. But in our English language, receive could be passive or it could be active. But I want to be sure that we understand that the taking is always active. It's always active. It's never a passive thing, right? And you must actively also give, and the mind or the spirit is internally self-governing. It controls itself from inside. It cannot be controlled from outside. Not even God controls your mind. He will not. He created you so that your own mind would control your own mind. Right? Now, the mind has different capacities. Identity, so who I am. It has conscience, which evaluates good and evil, or right and wrong. It has the will, where you make decisions or choice. It has the heart, where you evaluate gain and loss. I'm not talking about the blood pumping muscle. You have an intellect, which is your worldview, the puzzle picture of how things come together. You have reason, where you evaluate cause and effect. And you have imagination, where you can rearrange information. All of these are various different components of the mind. And in order for you to take information and evaluate it by these various different components and come to a decision or a conclusion, you must have a standard that each of these different components uses. So your identity must have a standard. Your conscience must have a standard. Every component must have a standard that it uses to evaluate that information. And if you are going to choose a standard, what kind do you want? One that changes or one that stays the same? You want a moving standard or a fixed standard? Fixed. And what is it that doesn't change? God's law doesn't change. Imagine what would happen if you could change the law. Just think about it. It would be as chaotic as changing gravity and thermodynamics and any other natural law that cannot change. The law of God cannot change. Cannot. But there's a general understanding in today's society, and has been for many years, that the law of God can be changed. Cannot. So if you have the law of God as your standard, then when you take truth and you evaluate the truth, the result will be that you do right. And when you, where'd my cursor go? There it is. All right, missing. And when you have the law as your guide, your standard, then when you're confronted with error, you will evaluate it according to the correct standard, and you will not do what's wrong. But what happens if you have a wrong standard? Well, now if you have a wrong standard and you're presented with the truth, you're going to evaluate it by the wrong standard, and you're not going to do what's right. And when you're confronted with error, you're going to evaluate by the wrong standard, and you're going to do what's wrong. So is it important to have the right standard? Absolutely. Absolutely. Otherwise, we come to completely wrong conclusions. Now, so you take information, you evaluate it, and then that puts it into bodily action because your spirit only gives to your body. That's where it's giving it. So that now what you decide can be put into action in your body or through your body, right? Now, God is a God of love. He created his intelligent creatures so that they could accept love and give love. And there's no other source of love than God, so all creatures are bound to God for love. And he loves us voluntarily, not because he's obligated or forced to. And so when we accept his love, we love voluntarily, not out of obligation, not out of force. And in love, we're free. Our actions are in harmony with his will. And all things work as they were designed to work, and we have love and joy and purpose and peace and pleasure and so on. Right? It's beautiful. And how do we conduct that self-government in love? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit more this afternoon. But we're going to take a short break now as we get ready for the main church service. And we're going to take a little bit deeper look at who God is and what he's like. Because I do a lot of counseling, and I find that the primary issue that I'm dealing with individuals is they don't know who God is, and they don't know what he's like. And if you don't know who he is and you don't know what he's like, but he's who you worship, then you become like something other than God is like. And it will kill you, even while you try to worship him. and it will create chaos in your relationships, and you will parent according to how you understand God to be. You will spouse as you understand God to be. You will mental health according to how you believe God to be, and so on and so forth, and it will have far-reaching effects in every area of your life. So that's where we're going to go next. I'm going to pray, and then we can take a break. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for your blessings. Thank you for law, natural law, moral law. Thank you that there is a foundation that does not change. And Lord, help us to understand that foundation and to stand upon it, that we might have not sifting sands, or shifting sands, but that we might have a firm foundation on the rock. Maybe that's why you chose rock to put your law on, to symbolize that unchanging nature. Well, Lord, thank you, and thank you that we can trust and hope in you. And Lord, in this next hour, reveal to us better who you are and what you are like, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.